Hey there guys, I am going to demonstrate how to do the next step of your mini house. So at this point you have put together your paper form. So here I have my little paper house. And remember, the important part about putting together your paper house is that we use that for our next step to make sure that our clay house fits together and looks good. So on each one of my pieces I have my name, but I'm also going to go through and actually write on there what spot is this on my house. For example, on the front, I wrote front. Right here, I'm gonna write roof. I could write large roof so that I know the difference between my tiny house and my larger house, or I could just write roof because hopefully it's pretty obvious which one it is. So I have all of them labeled. On this one, I just wrote tiny for everything. So tiny side, tiny front, tiny side, tiny roof, tiny roof. And then for here, I just put regular for the front of the house, the sides of the house, the back of the house. So I have it all labeled by what it is. That way, once I cut everything out and put it in my bag, I'll know which sides go together whenever I start to slip and score my piece. So I have everything labeled. I'm going to take it apart now. And hopefully you did just a little tiny piece of tape. That way it's easy to pull these apart. If you didn't, you can ask for help. We might need to kind of cut some pieces apart, but I'm just going to fold that extra tape right over. I'm not going to worry about pulling it off if it is on there. I'm just going to fold it right over my piece. Okay, so I have all of my little pieces and they're all cut out and separated now. So again, make sure that everything is separated. If you maybe had your roof and you just folded it at the top, you want to make sure you cut it apart. And then I'm going to set all of that to the side while I roll out my slab of clay. So I already started to roll this slab out. And remember, when you're rolling your slab out, your guide sticks need to be underneath your rolling pin. So notice they're touching. And I'm going to roll from the middle forward and from the middle back. And then I'm going to keep rotating this and flipping it and continuing to roll from the middle forward and the middle back. And notice that you can hear I'm touching the rolling pin to my guide sticks all the way through. You can hear that going back and forth. So I know that it's flat. So the next step is going to be to smooth out my slab. So I'm going to take a rib, and I would suggest using a metal rib for this. And I'm going to go through my slabs and make sure they're all smoothed out. And then I'm going to flip this over and smooth out the back side as well. Then I can start to take my pieces and set them onto my slab. I want to fit as many pieces on my slab as possible. The less you have to roll out, the less work. The easier it is just to put all of these onto one piece. So these teeny tiny pieces, they can fit right here on the corners. I should be able to fit a lot on just one piece of clay. Okay, so I went ahead and smoothed out my slab with my metal rib. Now I'm going to go through and actually cut out these tiny pieces of paper. I've set them down on my slab and I'm trying to keep them as close to each other as possible so that I save on my slab space. And I'm going to grab my ruler and a pin tool. And you want to lay the ruler down when you cut out your slabs. Otherwise, you will not get straight edges. And so I'm going to hold my ruler down as I cut my straight edge, and I'm going right on the side of my paper. And then I'm going to move my ruler with each side. If you have a curved side that you're cutting out, just be very, very careful when you go through it. You don't want to do it too quickly. You just want to go nice and slow. Also notice that I'm trying to keep my pin tool up straight. I do not want my pin tool to cut at an angle. because if I'm going to bevel any of my edges, which means to turn my edge at an angle, I want to do that later when I'm in control of the situation and I can tell what angle I'm creating my bevel at. All right, and notice that is a teeny tiny piece and I just cut it out very slowly. So it is important that you take your time, cut these out slowly, and I'm even trying to pull this away and it doesn't look like I cut all the way through. So I'm gonna peel that paper back so I don't rip it, and I'm gonna go back over my cut marks, again keeping my pin tool very straight, just to make sure I cut all the way through my clay slab. And then voila, I have my tiny little slab. I'm gonna set the paper that matches this on top, and I'm gonna set it to the side. That way I don't lose track of what piece this is. I'm gonna set it to the side, and then I'm gonna start to cut out my next slab. One trick that you can try is that if one edge lines up, you can line it right up with a straight edge that you've already cut out, and that's going to minimize how many times you have to cut, and it's going to save you on clay space for your slab. So I'm going to line this right up with the edge of my the side that I just cut out, and use my ruler, and now I'm only going to have 3 sides to cut out instead of all 4. All right, and there is my tiny little roof. Gonna set that again to the side, keeping this on top. That way I know what that slab piece is. And I have 3 more. All right, and now I've cut out all of the pieces just to my tiny house. I have them all finished, they're all sitting here, and I cut them all out from the same piece of slab, and that's really important that you make sure to cut all of your pieces out of the same slab, or a slab of the same consistency. So I did roll out another slab over here. That was from the same big slab. That was from the same lump of clay. And I rolled that out just to make sure that I had some extra, because it's better to roll out too much. Because let's say I am done cutting all of my slabs, I can hand this to someone who's sitting next to me. They can absolutely use the rest of this space to start to cut out some of their slabs. So you guys can even work together as a team to cut out like to roll out 2 or 3 large pieces of clay and then all use them together. I do still have the larger portion of my house. I'm going to start to cut that out of the larger piece of clay over there. This slab is slightly unique because it has some wrinkles in it, and I did want to demonstrate if you have wrinkles what you can do. You can grab a metal rib, but this is a tooth edge metal rib. You could also call this a scoring rib, and I'm actually going to score on top of all of those wrinkles. If you wanted to add just a little bit of water, that would be okay, but you don't have to. And I'm just going to score over those wrinkles because I don't want them to be in my final piece. So I don't need to do too much, but just a few areas that I noticed some wrinkles or some cracks. And then I'm going to take my smooth metal rib and go through and just smooth those areas out. And so I'm just getting rid of those wrinkles so they don't become an issue later. And I'm going to go ahead and smooth the entire slab out while I'm at it. And those areas that I just scored, I have to make sure that I use my metal rib in multiple directions to get rid of those scoring marks. But I'm creating an incredibly smooth slab by getting rid of those wrinkles. And then I'm going to flip my slab and smooth out the other side. Notice that I did pull the canvas out just to double check. And I do have another wrinkle right here, so I'm going to score that wrinkle. And wrinkles can happen because there might be a fold in your canvas. Wrinkles might happen because your clay is just a little bit drier. And dry clay is actually, not super dry clay, but firmer clay can actually be really, really helpful for this project because we need our clay to get to that leather hard stage before we can start to really put some cool textures into it or carve into it. So it's nice to have some firmer clay. Just have to put a little bit more muscle into it. Okay, so now I have all of my pieces. I'm gonna set my larger house pieces out onto this larger slab. And I'm gonna try to line up my roof pieces right next to each other because they're the same size, and my house pieces right next to each other because they have the same size for the base. And again, that way I'm trying to use, if I cut that line, I'm cutting it for both pieces. And then I'm gonna try to get as much to the side as I can. And any excess clay, again, like even if this is not used up here, I could try to give that to a table mate who has a similar sized house and would like to use that clay. Then I'm going to get my ruler back out and make sure that I'm using my ruler when I'm cutting all of my lines. That's so important. Now I finished cutting out all of my larger pieces for my larger house. And I, again, have the paper right on top. I'm going to start to pull those out. And just one at a time, I'm going to keep that paper label on top and set it off to the side. And then once I have all of these out, then I am done. And again, if I would like to use this slab for something else, I can, if I had any other little pieces or any chimneys or anything I wanted to add, I could go ahead and cut those out. Or I can just pass these off to a table mate. If I want one of them to be curved, let's say this was my piece right here, I would want to make sure that I curve it right now. So maybe I'm going to create like a little bit of an arc. I'm going to kind of create that arc right now so that it's done, it's ready to go. Maybe this is like a little porch bench or something on my front porch. But if I don't curve it right now, it's going to firm up and then it's going to crack on me later when I try to bend it. So I'm just going to set that right there in a nice little arc on top of my stack. All right, this is the next step of your house project. Enjoy! Okay, now that I have all of my pieces cut out, I'm going to stack them. And what I want you to be careful of, this stack is really good. They're all stacked on top of each other. Nothing is hanging over. What I want to be careful about is things like this. You don't want something hanging over because what could happen is something could get set on this and that would smush this side. So I want to make sure that all of my sides or all of my pieces are sitting flat. So this is a much wiser choice. And then I could set this one down with these on top of it. And then I could even set my tiny house pieces on top of this one, and maybe these ones on top of this stack. And so I have my two stacks, but everything is flat. Then I want to put it inside of my Ziploc bag. And after it's in my Ziploc bag, I then need to get it on a flat surface. So I'm very carefully slipping my pieces into my bag. And I now have them at the end of my bag. I'm going to push the air out. I'm going to zip it up. And then I'm going to set it on top of my visual art book or a folder or something flat that can stay in my locker. I'm very carefully going to take that and set that on top of my visual art book. And then it's all sitting flat, it's stored safely, and I can go put it in my locker. And it's ready for tomorrow. And again, just double check that your bag is zipped all the way and that there's no air getting into that, even if you want to try to wrap it around underneath and tuck it in. But you just want it nice and safe and stacked flat.